If you like Star Trek and Star Wars and you like ship battles, you'll like this channel. And if you like what you see, please subscribe and make a comment. It helps. It really does. And with that being said, let's get started. Alright, my Trekkie friends, I got something really cool to show you guys, and I want to see what you guys think of this. So I went and picked up Star Trek's role-playing game, Starships. And what this is it's supposed to have a bunch of data tables and information you can build and play your own Star Trek game. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is the data tables that are inside there are supposed to be representing what the ships actually are in the show. But I have some issues with what I found in here, and I want to discuss that with you guys. So I'm going to take a look at this thing, and I wanted to compare the Galore to the Excelsior because we're constantly hearing all the time online, and everyone says that the Galore and the Excelsior are pretty similar in power, scaling, and things of that nature. And so let's go find out if this is true. All right, so comparing them right off the bat, something bothers me. Galore class cruiser, right? But they have a Kelton variant showing up first. So they don't even have the right picture for the right ship on here, which bothers me. But I know there's an argument to be said that the Kelton and the Galore are the same ship, and there's just additional modules on it. So I'm going to let it slide. So before we compare the Galore to the Excelsior, we need to at least have an understanding what the Excelsior has so we know what we're comparing to. So we'll start that off with the Excelsior. So let's take a look at what we got. Okay, so the Excelsior is a cruiser. It was also commissioned in 2284, had a retrofit of 2331. So structures 35, size and decks 7 to 30, length 470 by 111 by 266. Complement 770 crew. Phasers, it says that it carries Type 8 phasers. Torpedo launcher is an MK-22DF. And this deflector shield is a CID SS2 Class C. So let's go ahead and look at the Impulse is an LF-35, which has got a rating of warp 6 for its standard. Its cruising speed could be at 9.2, and its absolute max is 9.8. So the ship's pretty fast. Let's go look at what else we got here. So we have cargo units. Okay, we have cargo units at 70, life support class 2, operational systems class 4, sensor systems class 2, shuttle bays 1, shuttles 7, tractor beams 2, transporters 8, 2 standard, 4 emergency. So overall, the ship is pretty good. I mean, we see its operational systems is really high. Class 4 is very high. That'd be something that you would be seeing with most standard ships of the TNG era. And then Class 2 would fall into the, Captain Kirk era, which makes perfect sense because this is a combat ship, so the sensors are not the primary. They're not the primary source of what the ship is supposed to be there to do. So they're not going to put additional components and use up space that can be used up for weapons and other things that are more important for a better shield grid and things of that nature. So all that makes sense to me. A Class 2 sensor, that's not really that great. We do see other ships in the Federation like that, such as the Defiant. The Defiant, if I remember correctly, uses a Class 2, which it doesn't really have a lot of space. And just so people understand, the way that this data table is looking is each component has a certain amount of space it takes. It's breaking down what the ship actually has. So you're not wasting space by just saying every ship can have everything, because that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so being a tactical vessel, it makes sense. Okay, and so now we're going to take a look at the Galore class cruiser. It's a battle cruiser. It was commissioned in 2355. Structure 35, size and decks 6 of 12, length 371, height 59, beam 192.23. It has 300 crew. It's tactical data, spirewave disruptors, a CGDM3 says times 4, and then a CGDM5, which must be a heavy spirewave cannon, has 1. And its deflector shield is a CIDSS2C, which is the same as the Excelsior. This doesn't say it has any torpedoes of any kind. Its maneuverability is a plus 3C. Okay, its warp system, its impulse system, I don't really care about that. The warp system is a Type 5 DC. And as you can see, it has less stats and it can't move as quickly. So a standard of 5, it can go at warp 9.5 and it has a max of 9.7. So the warp system on this ship is not as efficient as the Excelsior. Operational data, cargo unit 60, life support class 3, operational systems class 3. And this is the part that doesn't make sense to me, and I don't think this is right, but it says as a sensor system of a class 5. So that means its sensor systems are better than even a Galaxy class starship, which is not correct. I don't believe that for a second. Shuttle Bay 1, shuttlecraft, it has 6 shuttlecrafts, 1 tractor beam, transporters, 7 standard, and 7 emergency. And one of these other things it does say that they have montanium plating. So that makes sense. I mean, they have a really powerful hull, and we've seen that, and that does, in my opinion, make a lot of sense. So taking it like this, it's a pretty interesting concept, and then putting this stuff together. I do see some flaws. For an example, I mean, the sensor systems class 5. There's no way that the Cardassians have sensor systems that are better than a Galaxy-class starship, which was top of the line during this time period when they ran into the Cardassians. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Now, if they were saying that they had some kind of Dominion upgrade, that would make sense, but this is based off Cardassian technology. This is not having anything to do with the Dominion, so that makes no sense whatsoever. And I also to me it makes sense that they would have, a CIDSS2, which is a class 3 shield or a class C shield, in that time period. The shield that I show them on screen, collapsing after 4 shots from a Galaxy class starship. I mean, they obviously don't have very strong shields. That's just, it's evident. It's like 260,000, which is what I have seen on here. And then just so you guys understand, like the Excelsior is like 585, and there could be an argument that it could be like 1,040,000 terawatts. All this is all terawatts, by the way. And which other way you get it, I don't see the Cardassians. It makes sense to me they should have a shield equivalent. The shield being so weak just made the ship so crappy that they were just laughable on screen. But the way people treat the Galore, it wasn't like treated like this was just some complete and utter piece of garbage. It was treated like it was a modern warship. So I can kind of go with it, and I think that the on-screen depiction is probably wrong, and that the ship probably did have this kind of level of shield, which would make more sense and would make the ship, more of a threat than the way it's portrayed on the show or the way that my data tables view it. But I don't agree whatsoever with the idea that this thing has a class 5 sensor array. That's insane. That there's no way for me to compute that or make an argument for it. There's just no way. That makes no sense whatsoever. The slower warp systems, that was shown in the show. We know that's true. I think most of this data is accurate, and we know that they didn't use torpedoes a lot of the times because it's so expensive using antimatter weapons. That actually makes a lot of sense because we don't see a Galor ever fire a torpedo, except for and during TNG. There is an episode where there is a Galor Type 3 stated by Riker to be top of the line, and that it is firing torpedoes. So I don't think torpedoes are standard on Galors. I think they are only seen on the Type 3 variant. And I know that there is confusion in the community about a Type 2 and a Type 3. I've heard that people claim that Type 2 is the more advanced version than the Type 3. That is incorrect based on TNG Riker's statement, who is the, you know, commander of the Enterprise, who's the number 2. I think that he would have a relatively good understanding of Cardassian technology, and I think that his statement is accurate, and that the community who thinks the Type 2 and Type 3s, that the Type 3 is a less advanced version and the Type 2 is the most advanced version, I don't see that argument being correct. So, some more notable information that's coming from this handbook is that the Romulan warbird is using a shield of an FSQ quality. So, a shield which is in FSQ is much better than you see on a Galaxy class. That is a Type 3. It would be the same as the Akira or the Defiant. So, these brand new state of the art military starships are using the FSQ, which is interesting. So I just wanted to share that information with you guys. And I want to kind of show you some of the data tables. And then if I put them with stuff that I've seen through the show itself and calculated the numbers, I want to show you what kind of shields we're seeing and give you guys a little bit of an idea of what we're seeing. So here's some additional information with the Romulan warbird. Based on the data you can see here, it's pretty close to the Galaxy with most things, which makes a lot of sense because that's kind of goes in canon with the ship and the technology. So now let's kind of look at those shields that I was talking about. So this is coming out of the book. So the first section is telling you the size. So let's just look at the PFF2A at the top. So it has a size of a 6 and it has a defense level of 13. And the 1 3/4 is talking about subsystems. So the higher it is. So it's telling you that there's a backup basically. So for the PFF, there's no backup. The PFF2, there is a backup. And then the PFF2A, it's bigger, a little stronger, and it has multiple backups. So those numbers are associating backup systems and things of that nature. So I don't really care that much about that. I'm more concerned about the defensive value, the middle column. So I just kind of want to show you guys that, and then we'll move on. Okay, so I've taken some of my data tables from the show that have the conversions with the formulas and then added them into this manual Star Trek role-playing game manual to show you what we got. So a standard Constitution PFF-2A would be a shield of 390,000. It has a defensive value of 13. And then the hull is 325,000. And then in this book, it says it's a 13 out of 3. I don't really understand what the 13 out of 3 because there are ships. It's not referring to the size. I think it's referring to the plating or armor level to the ship, but I'm not entirely sure. Anyways, we'll move on. So the shields of a Galaxy class are in the CIDSS versions. It's a Type 3. It's 1,755,000, and it has a defensive point value of 15 in the book. So a PFF is a Class 1. It'd be things seen like on freighters and things of that nature, like Cardassians and Klingon freighters and stuff are using PFF1s or PFF2s. So I put a PFF1 as being what I seen a Galore at 260,000. Your D7s and the original Enterprise would be a PFF2 level of 325,000. The Constitution Rift is a PFF2A, which is a modified version, so it's 390,000. So we see that in the movie, as well as the Katanga would be carrying one of these, and newer Birds of Prey. A PFF3 is a upgraded version that you see in the future done to the Constitution Rift. And so we have a couple possibilities. It could be 585,000 or 780,000. The reason why I have two separate numbers is when I was doing this shielding, there's actually a part where the Excelsior gets shot in the back and then it gets shot in the front. And it instantly gets hit, and then the back engine explodes almost as if its shields are all facing forward. So in my original analysis, I left that out. But the more I thought about it, I thought maybe I should probably have left it in there. And so the Excelsior shields would then be 780,000 instead of my 585,000, which is a rating of 14. So a CIDSS-1 would be a level 13. It has 390,000, which is the same as, the advanced war version. So during the Enterprise or the next generation, basically one of the best shields out there is now become the most common, mundane, normal, low-level ship. And then your standard ships, which would be the CIDSS-2, those are Galors, those are Excelsiors, those are all pretty much your medium-class ships of the TNG era. Your big badass ships are using the CIDSS-3, so that's going to be the Enterprise, the Nebula, and then this is kind of interesting. So it states that the Klingon Volca class cruiser is actually using a class 4, which is better than the Enterprise, which is very possible. It is a warship generated for war. So I went ahead and added it. There's not a very big difference between the two. So it's like 1,798,000. And so I put it on there. Now there are different variants because there are 3 power levels seen with disruptors. So the standard is 32,500, and then the highest is like 86,000 something. So it does a pretty big difference as far as the power level for the possibility. But if I did the highest one, it comes into like the 200,000 range, if I remember right. And it just seemed like too overkill for the Klingons. And so I just don't think that. I just used the standard first level, the most common one seen. And then the FSQ, that's when we start seeing things like the Defiant, the Akira, and other ships. I know, like, my data tables have shown the Akira using the same, CIDSS-3 shield. But this is stating that it's not. We know for a fact that the Defiant shields are 4,460,000, and we see this off the Lakota. I believe is not the Lakota, the Valiant, which is the ship that got blown up by the Jem'Hadar battleship. My original analysis had the torpedoes at 65,000, which was inaccurate, and there's actually, those torpedoes should have been 171,000, which was the standard. So when I remodified it, that shield matrix actually worked better with what we see the Defiant doing during the Battle of Kantaka, because the first battle with the Lakota, the Defiant shields are 1,040,000, which is what we see the CIDSS-2. But, that wasn't really that strong and didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, but that is what it was. And the more I thought about it, the Defiant then was the Defiant prototype, and the prototype may not have been using any kind of standard Federation shield, and that might be why it doesn't really fit into any of these categories. But for sure, we know that the Violent, however you say it, I can't remember, and then the Defiant 2, that they had a superior shield than what we saw with the very first time we seen the Defiant go against the Federation starship, the Lakota. So with that being said, that's where the FSQ is coming from, and then the FSQ-1A, that's used for shuttles. The 1A and the 2 are both shuttles, and then the FSQ-7, this is seen on the Nigvar class battle cruiser for the Klingons. So, and then I don't have any readings for the in-between stuff at this moment. And then I have an FSS-3, which is the best shield that we have on here. and that shield is seen on the Enterprise E, and it's 7,722,000. And this book also states that some of the Borg ships are using that too. And then just some other additional notes. It says the Voyager is also using an FSQ shield. So the Voyager, if this is correct, that's a really, really, and which makes sense because all the modern ships should be using more modern shields. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So you can see like how we have the FSQ as a 17 level, and then the FSQ7 is also a 17 level. So I don't really make them exactly the same. I just say that they're kind of in the same kind of ballpark when it comes to the numbers, because obviously there's going to be differences because, I mean, a PFF1, PFF2 are the same, and, you know, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but I just generally have them in the same ballpark. So if you go and take my data tables and you put them on this book's data tables, we now kind of have an understanding of the shields, and then we know the exact shields on the ships. So with these kind of discrepancies, like the CIDSS, like I know for a fact that the Excelsior shields are not, because we know that the Excelsior and the Galore are using the same shield classification. And so my data of 260,000, it could be off, and they could have been using a 780,000 shield, which is seen on the Excelsior class. But if that is the case, then that would also change the Galaxy class phasers from 65,000 to, I think it would have to be in the 200,000 range, which is very possible since that Galaxy class was heavily upgraded, and it shows that in the book. The Galaxy class is actually using a FSQ shield during the Dominion War, and then it had modified torpedo launchers, and it also had the same, it said the same phasers, but the phasers could have been modified. So the phasers could have been modified. Sorry about that, folks. My video got cut out there at the last minute. So these are just the data tables I have in there. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Do you like this kind of stuff? Do you guys want me to show you more data tables? Do you want me to convert more formulas? If you like this, let me know. If you think this is kind of boring and want me to do other stuff, let me know too.